Now, let me tell you a story that starts just like any other, with good intentions and a quiet lie tucked beneath a smile. You see, one morning, a daughter said to her mother, "We're going tomorrow, Mom. I've sold your beach house." But what she didn't know was that she wasn't selling a house. She was selling her own reflection, the one her mother built, loved, and trusted. And this story, my friends, isn't about property. It's about possession, not of things, but of truth, time, and heart. That beach house wasn't made of bricks alone. It was made of years. Birthdays that smelled of sea salt and cake, summers where laughter spilled out the open windows, winters where the storm outside was no match for the warmth within. Every corner of that house held a story. Every window had seen tears, forgiveness, and fresh starts. You know how some places feel alive. That's how this house was. It breathed the memories of those who loved within its walls. It wasn't grand or fancy, but it was theirs, built on effort, sacrifice, and love that didn't need to be spoken. Now, the daughter, she thought she was doing the right thing. Times were changing, and she thought her mother would understand. After all, she reasoned, money could buy something better, something easier to maintain, maybe closer to the city. But that's the thing about reason, it sounds logical until it meets love. Because love doesn't measure in convenience. It measures in meaning. When the papers were signed, the daughter smiled, believing she'd done what was best. But the mother, she just nodded quietly. She didn't shout, didn't scold, didn't cry. She simply looked at the ocean one last time and said, "All right, dear, that's all." All. 2 words, but behind them was a lifetime of lessons she knew her daughter would have to learn the hard way. You see, mothers have a sense that no amount of time can dull. They can see the storm coming before the sky even darkens. And this mother, she saw it. But she also knew that sometimes, the only teacher stronger than a mother's voice is regret. Years passed. The daughter moved into new houses, built a career, and surrounded herself with everything she thought success looked like. But somehow no place ever felt like home. The walls echoed differently. No laughter lingered there. There were no old floorboards to creak like familiar songs, no ocean wind to whisper stories at night. Every now and then, she'd catch herself remembering the smell of her mother's cooking, the soft hum of the waves outside that beach house, the sound of her own young laughter carried by the wind. Regret doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes, it comes like a tide. Slowly, gently, but relentlessly returning. One afternoon, she found herself driving down the old coastal road. She hadn't planned it, her heart simply led her there. When she arrived, she stopped and stared. The house stood the same, though the paint was brighter, and the laughter now belonged to strangers. A young family was sitting on the porch, their children chasing seagulls in the sand. And that's when she felt it. The ache of understanding. She realized that you can sell a building, but you can't sell the spirit of a home. You can transfer deeds and change locks, but the love that built a place stays right where it was made. She stood there a while, quietly watching, and for the first time, she understood her mother's silence. It wasn't anger or bitterness. It was wisdom, the kind that lets time do the teaching. Because revenge, my friends, isn't always about getting even. Sometimes it's about living long enough to see truth return like the tide. The daughter went back to her car with tears in her eyes but peace in her heart. She didn't hate herself, she had learned. She realized that some things, love, trust, memory, can't be priced or replaced. They're meant to be protected, cherished, passed down. And though her mother was gone by then, she could almost hear her voice, soft as the sea breeze. You understand now, don't you, dear? Life has a way of showing us that real revenge isn't about payback. It's about becoming wiser, gentler, more grounded in what truly matters. It's about refusing to let betrayal harden your heart. It's rebuilding yourself so fully that the pain that once defined you no longer fits inside your joy. So when you hear someone say, "We're going tomorrow, Mom. I've sold your beach house," remember, the sale might be legal, but the lesson that follows is eternal. Hold fast to what is sacred. Protect what's built with love. And when life takes from you, don't chase vengeance. Let time handle that part. Because in the end, life always brings back the tide. And it never forgets what belongs to the shore. That beach house wasn't built with money. It was built with memories. Every nail had a story, every beam carried laughter, and the windows. Oh, those windows. They held the reflection of sunlit mornings and faces full of joy. You could walk through that house and hear echoes of old summers, of children running barefoot down sandy halls, of music playing from the radio while dinner simmered on the stove. Even the porch seemed to sigh at night, as though it remembered every story ever told upon it. The mother who owned that house didn't think of it as a property. She thought of it as a piece of her family's soul. She and her husband built it when life was still simple, when dreams were small but steady. They didn't have much, but they had each other. And somehow, that was enough. When the walls went up, so did their hopes. When the paint dried, it wasn't just white. It was the color of fresh beginnings. And every year, as life changed and people came and went, that house stood, steady as her love. Now, the daughter grew up in those rooms. To her, the beach house was always just there, the background to birthdays, holidays, heartbreaks, and homecomings. You know how it is when you're young, you don't realize you're living inside something sacred until it's gone. The smell of sea salt mixed with her mother's cooking, the way the floorboards creaked just before the old rocking chair. These were things she took for granted. Because when love is constant, it can start to feel invisible. That's the thing about family. It's often quiet, steady, unspoken. It hides in routines and little gestures that don't feel like much until you look back and realize they were everything. Like the way her mother always waited on the porch light until the last person came home, or how she never complained when storms broke the windows, just patched them up again, saying, "It's all right." The sea tests what it loves. Over the years, the beach house became more than a home. It was an anchor, a place everyone returned to, no matter how far life took them. There's a reason psychologists say that a sense of belonging is one of the strongest predictors of happiness. The Harvard Adult Development Study, the longest-running study on happiness, found something simple yet profound. The key to a fulfilling life isn't wealth or status, but relationships, the quality of our connections with one another. And that house was built on connection. It wasn't big or fancy. The tiles were chipped, the paint faded, and the pipes sometimes rattled. But it had warmth, the kind of warmth that money can't buy and time can't erase. You see, love leaves fingerprints. Not the kind you can see, but the kind you can feel when you walk into a place that has held more laughter than arguments, more forgiveness than pride. That's what that beach house carried. When guests came, they always said the same thing. "It feels peaceful here." They couldn't quite explain it, but they felt it. That invisible hum of love stitched into the walls. And the mother would just smile and say, "It's because we built it together." Now, I'll tell you something, my dear. When a home is built with love, it becomes alive, it remembers. Long after the people are gone, it still holds their stories in its bones. It's why some houses feel empty even when they're full, and others feel full even when they're empty. And yet, somewhere along the way, the daughter forgot what that house meant. Maybe it was life. The rush, the noise, the endless chase to be successful. Maybe she thought love could wait while progress took the wheel. It's a mistake so many of us make, trading moments for milestones, connection for convenience. She saw the house as an asset, not an heirloom. A burden, not a blessing. She thought she could build something better elsewhere. Newer, sheenier, less weathered by time. But what she didn't see was that this old house was the map to who she was. Because that beach house was never just a structure. It was love that had taken form, love that could be touched, smelled, and lived in. It was the scent of morning coffee drifting through open windows, the laughter of cousins piling into one bed after a storm, the quiet prayers whispered by a mother who believed that if her family was safe, she had everything she needed. And that's what makes this story so human. Because every one of us has our own version of that house. Maybe it's not a house at all. Maybe it's a song that takes you back, or a recipe your grandmother taught you, or the sound of a voice that made you feel seen. These are the things that hold our true wealth. They are the foundations we forget we're standing on. That beach house was built from love, not lumber, from patience, not plans. And like all things born from love, it asked for only one thing in return: to be remembered. So when the daughter sold it, she thought she was securing her future, getting ahead, making a smart move. The world had taught her that progress meant letting go of the past, that security came from money, not memories. She told herself it was practical, even kind. Her mother was getting older, after all, and that house was too much work to keep up. The taxes were high, the maintenance endless, the storms rougher every year. She sat at the kitchen table one night, papers spread out before her, the pen trembling slightly in her hand. She told herself it was the right thing, that her mother would understand, that family was about moving forward, not holding on. But deep down she knew. There's always that small whisper beneath reason, that quiet ache that says, "You're crossing a line you can't uncross." When she signed those papers, she didn't just sell a property. She sold the soil her roots had grown in. She traded something sacred for something safe, and that's a trade that never comes out even. Auntie Mae would have leaned over just then, tapped her finger on the table, and whispered, "Never mistake inheritance for entitlement. Because one comes from love, and the other from assumption. And love, my dear, has a memory longer than money's reach." See, the daughter thought she was saving herself from the burden of upkeep, from the weight of responsibility. But what she didn't realize was that the beach house wasn't a burden. It was a bridge. It connected generations. It carried laughter from her grandparents to her, and it waited to carry her love to whoever came next. When she sold it, she didn't just close a deal, she closed a door that time itself had built. Now, betrayal doesn't always come with shouting or cruelty. It often walks in quietly, dressed as reason. It's the kind of betrayal you can justify to yourself while your heart breaks in silence. You see, betrayal doesn't start with a dagger. It starts with a decision. A small, quiet one. The kind you make late at night when you tell yourself it's for the best. The daughter told her mother the news with a practiced calm, her voice too smooth, her smile too bright. "We're going tomorrow, Mom. I've sold your beach house." Just like that, as if saying it quickly could soften the blow. The mother didn't yell. She didn't argue. She just looked at her daughter, eyes gentle but knowing, and said softly, "Oh, I see." And that was it. No tears. No anger. Just a silence that filled the room heavier than any storm outside. You could almost hear the house sigh. The walls that had listened to their laughter now holding their silence. That's the thing about wisdom. It doesn't always fight. Sometimes it just watches and waits. The mother knew what her daughter didn't yet understand, that life always circles back. That one day, the girl who thought she was being practical would stand on some quiet street, wondering why her heart felt empty even when her hands were full. When the movers came, the daughter packed the boxes neatly. The sound of tape-sealing cardboard echoed through rooms that had once echoed with music. She touched the walls one last time, but they felt colder now, as if the house already knew it was no longer theirs. On the drive away, she kept her eyes on the road, refusing to look in the rearview mirror. But the reflection followed her anyway. The porch light still on, the ocean wind still moving the curtains as if the house was waving goodbye. You know, people think revenge is something you take. But life has a quieter kind. It doesn't shout. It simply waits until you've built your new world and then lets you realize what you lost to make it. That's the real revenge, not from others, but from time. Because time, my dear, always brings us face to face with what we traded away. The daughter thought the sale was a fresh start, a way to build her own story. But in truth, she'd erased a chapter of her life without realizing how it held the rest together. You can sell a house, but you can't sell the feeling of belonging. You can sign your name on the dotted line, but you can't sign away your roots. And somewhere, deep inside, she knew that. Because late at night, when the world went quiet and her new house was too clean, too polished, too silent, she missed the sound of the waves brushing against the shore. The same sound that used to lull her to sleep as a child. That's when she began to understand what her mother never said out loud, that some things you don't own, you honor. That love once sold leaves a space that no amount of success can fill. And though she didn't know it yet, that lesson, quiet, painful, and patient, would be the beginning of her undoing, and perhaps the start of her redemption. What she didn't know was that her mother already knew. Mothers have a way of knowing, not from words or confessions, but from the way the air shifts around a lie. They can hear truth in silence, see worry in a smile, and feel distance long before it's measured in miles. A mother's knowing doesn't come from logic, it comes from love. And this mother, she saw it all before a single paper was signed. She noticed how her daughter avoided eye contact when the beach house came up in conversation, how her laughter sounded a little too practiced, how she suddenly had so many things to take care of. She knew the tone of guilt hidden beneath good intentions. Mothers always do. But she said nothing. The mother didn't argue. She didn't beg. She didn't plead for her memories to be spared or for her home to remain untouched. Instead, she went quiet, the kind of quiet that carries 1,000 unspoken words. She simply began to pack her life into boxes, one by one, folding memories as gently as she once folded her daughter's baby clothes. There's a kind of strength in stillness. Some people mistake it for surrender, but Auntie Mae would tell you it's the sharpest kind of revenge. Because revenge, my dear, isn't always loud. It doesn't always come in shouting or slamming doors. Sometimes it's the calm acceptance that says, "You'll learn, not from me, but from life." As the mother wrapped each photo frame in newspaper, her hands trembled a little. She wasn't angry, just tired. Tired of explaining things that couldn't be understood until they were lived. She ran her fingers across the old wooden table, the one where birthdays were celebrated, where family secrets were whispered, where hands were held through hard times. That table had seen everything, and now it would see her say goodbye. On the night before they were set to leave, she walked out to the porch one last time. The sea breeze carried that familiar salty scent, and the sound of waves filled the quiet. The stars reflected in her eyes as she whispered a small prayer. Not for revenge, but for revelation. Because deep down, she knew that time would teach her daughter what words never could. The next morning, the movers came. They worked quickly, unaware that every piece they carried wasn't just furniture. It was a lifetime of love, joy, and sacrifice. The mother stood by, offering gentle directions, her face unreadable. Her daughter busied herself with phone calls, lists, and polite smiles. She told herself it was progress. She told herself she was doing the right thing. But as the last box was placed on the truck, the mother turned to look at the house one final time. She didn't see walls and windows. She saw her younger self laughing with her husband on that porch, saw her little girl running barefoot through the sand, saw the light of family dinners spilling out of those windows into the night. And though her heart broke quietly, she smiled. Because she knew something her daughter didn't. Some lessons can't be taught by love alone. They must be taught by loss. When the daughter noticed her mother's silence, she mistook it for agreement. She thought the absence of argument meant peace. But no, it was wisdom. The kind of wisdom that doesn't chase, doesn't correct, doesn't cling. The kind that trusts that life will circle back and show the truth in its own time. Auntie Mae used to say, "A mother's revenge isn't fire, it's patience." Because she knows that love never disappears, it just waits. And when the time is right, it shows up as understanding. That heavy, quiet understanding that changes a person from the inside out. After they moved, the mother settled into a smaller place. It was tidy, convenient, and perfectly fine, but it didn't hum the way the beach house did. Still, she never complained. When friends asked if she missed it, she'd smile and say, "Oh, the sea belongs to no one. It just lets us visit for a while." But sometimes in the evenings, she'd sit by her window and imagine the tide washing over the shore, imagine the laughter that once filled that space, imagine her daughter one day standing there, remembering. She didn't hope for regret. She hoped for understanding, the kind that grows only after the noise of pride fades. And she was right to wait. Because life, my dear, has a perfect sense of timing. The truth doesn't always arrive when you want it to. It comes when you're quiet enough to hear it. So the mother let time do its work. She let silence be her teacher's aid. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't in proving someone wrong. It's in knowing they'll come to the truth themselves, and when they do, they'll hear your voice in their heart whispering, "Now you understand." The years passed, as they always do. Seasons changed, faces changed, and so did the daughter. On the surface, she had everything she once thought she wanted. A fine house with tall ceilings and glass walls, a job that kept her busy enough to feel important, and friends who spoke more about plans than about peace. Yet, in the quiet hours of the night, when the world went still and the hum of her success faded, there was a space inside her that success couldn't fill. Money had made her house bigger, yes, but her life had grown smaller. The laughter that used to come so easily felt harder to find. Her mother's voice, once a comforting constant, had become a memory she visited in her dreams. And the ocean that once sang to her childhood, now belonged to strangers. She would see it sometimes in photos or on television, and it would stir something deep inside her, but she never went back. Not yet. Not until the tide called her by name again. It happened one late summer afternoon, many years later. She found herself driving without purpose, the road carrying her where logic had long refused to go. The air was heavy with the scent of salt and wild grass, and before she realized it, the sound of waves was close again. She parked near the old road she once knew so well, kicked off her shoes, and walked barefoot onto the sand. The sand felt the same. Isn't that strange? How some things never forget us, even when we forget them. The grains slipped through her toes just like when she was little, and the sea breeze touched her face, as if greeting an old friend. For a moment, she stood still and listened. To the waves, to the wind, to her own heartbeat. It was as if time folded in on itself, and the little girl she used to be stood right beside her. And there it was. The beach house. Her mother's house. The house that love had built. Only now it stood dressed in new colors, the porch repaired, the garden bright with flowers she didn't recognize. A new family lived there. A mother, a father, and 2 children running along the shore. She watched them for a while, hidden by the dunes, her heart both heavy and light. The children laughed the same way she once did, loud and unguarded. The mother called out to them with that same mix of patience and joy her own mother had once had. Their voices echoed through the open windows, and in that sound, she heard her past. Her own laughter, her mother's song, the hum of dinners and stories that had once filled those rooms. And in that moment, she realized something powerful. You can sell the walls, but you can't sell the soul of what was built with love. Love lingers. It doesn't disappear when ownership changes. It stays in the air, in the echoes, in the way light falls across a room that once held devotion. That house didn't belong to her anymore, yet somehow, it always would. That's when the tide of regret came in. Quiet, steady, unstoppable. It didn't come to punish her, it came to teach her. Regret has a way of washing over you slowly, reminding you not of what you lost, but of what you failed to cherish when you had it. She didn't cry at first. She just stood there, her eyes fixed on the home that had taught her the difference between having something and belonging to it. Eventually, she sat down on the sand and let the waves reach her feet. The sea didn't judge her. It never does. It just moves back and forth, forgiving everything. And as she watched the water shimmer under the late afternoon sun, she whispered softly, "I understand now, Mom." The wind carried her words away, maybe to the sky, maybe back to her mother, wherever she was. The family on the porch never noticed her watching. They went on laughing, the way families should. And she was glad for that. Because somewhere deep down, she knew her mother would have wanted that. For love to continue. For the house to keep breathing joy, even if it wasn't theirs anymore. She stayed until the sun began to set, the horizon glowing gold and pink. As the tide crept closer, the water brushed against her ankles, cool and gentle, like a touch from the past saying, "It's all right." For the first time in years, she didn't feel the ache of loss. She felt gratitude. Gratitude that she had known a love deep enough to miss. Gratitude that her mother's lesson had finally found its way home to her heart. And as she walked away, the ocean whispered behind her, calm and endless, reminding her that some things never truly leave us. They just wait, like the tide, for the moment we're ready to return. Now listen carefully, because this is where Auntie Mae always drives it home. She'd lean back in her chair, fold her hands in her lap, and say in that steady, knowing voice, "Revenge isn't about getting even, it's about letting time do the teaching." And she'd be right. Because time, my dear, is the greatest teacher and the fairest judge there is. It doesn't rush, it doesn't shout, but it never fails to deliver the lesson. The true revenge in this story wasn't in the mother's silence or the daughter's loss. It wasn't in angry words or slammed doors. It was in the slow unfolding of understanding. The kind that doesn't sting in the moment but settles deep, quietly changing the way you see everything. That's the kind of revenge life deals out. Not with cruelty, but with clarity. You see, the daughter learned what her mother had always known, that no shortcut lasts. You can win a moment through cleverness or control, but life has a way of balancing the scales. You may gain something you can hold, but you'll lose something you can feel. Greed, whether it's for money, success, or pride, never fills the hollow that opens when love is lost. That hollow, once formed, becomes a teacher of its own. Auntie Mae would say, "Child, people think betrayal is about what's taken from you, but really, it's about what they lose by doing it." And she's right. The daughter didn't just lose a house. She lost her reflection in her mother's eyes. That sense of being rooted, the peace that comes from knowing you've honored where you came from. But the mother. She lost nothing that truly mattered, because she never let bitterness take root. She chose grace. That's where the wisdom lies, not in holding on to anger, but in letting life carry it for you. Because revenge doesn't always need a plan, sometimes it only needs patience. The mother understood that. She knew that fighting for what was already gone would only make her smaller. So she stepped aside, quietly, and let time do the teaching. And teach it did. The daughter's lesson came not as punishment, but as realization. She discovered that peace cannot be bought, and legacy cannot be replaced. That lesson, that deep, humbling understanding, was the real revenge. The kind that doesn't destroy but rebuilds. In business, in family, in friendship, the rule is the same. When you trade loyalty for gain, you may win the moment but lose the story. And stories, my dear, are what remain when everything else fades. A house crumbles, money runs out, beauty changes, but the story, the way you loved, the way you gave, the way you treated others, that's what echoes long after you're gone. The daughter, in her time, came to understand this. One day, long after her mother had passed, she told her own children about that beach house. She told them how she once thought she was being wise, doing the practical thing, only to realize that practicality without heart is just another form of loss. Her voice would break a little when she said it, but there was light in her eyes. The kind that comes only from forgiveness, both given and received. Real revenge, you see, isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Right to rise, right to heal, right to keep loving even when love was betrayed. It's walking away with peace when someone expected you to break. It's rebuilding yourself in such a way that the pieces of your old pain no longer fit inside your new joy. Auntie Mae used to say that some people spend their whole lives collecting hurts, wearing them like medals to prove how strong they are. But real strength, she'd say, is when you can set those hurts down and walk away lighter. The mother did that. She didn't curse her daughter, didn't seek to make her suffer. She trusted the quiet rhythm of life, the same way she trusted the tides to return. And just like the tide, the lesson came back. Slow, inevitable, complete. When the daughter finally learned, it wasn't a moment of despair. It was a moment of awakening. She realized that her mother's silence was never weakness. It was wisdom wrapped in patience. That her mother's calm wasn't indifference. It was faith in time's justice, and that her mother's forgiveness wasn't for the daughter's sake, but for her own peace. So when Auntie Mae says, "Let time do the teaching," she doesn't mean let life hurt you and call it fate. She means let it shape you without hardening you. Let it teach you what love really means. Not possession, not pride, but presence. Because when love teaches, it never leaves you empty, it leaves you whole. And that, my dear, is the sweetest revenge of all. To live a life so full, so gentle, and so grounded in peace that the wrong done to you becomes nothing more than a story of how you grew stronger. So, when you hear someone say, "We're going tomorrow, I've sold your beach house," remember, the sale may be legal, but the lesson is eternal. Because some things can be signed away in ink, but never in spirit. There are contracts that buy land, and there are those that break hearts. And while money can change hands in an instant, wisdom takes its time. It waits for life to do the teaching. You see, what the daughter didn't understand in the beginning was that she wasn't just selling wood and stone. She was selling a story, one that had taken years to build. That house wasn't simply a structure, it was her mother's faith, her laughter, her patience, her love made visible. And when she sold it, she thought she was moving forward, but really, She was leaving behind the very thing that made her strong enough to move at all. That's the quiet danger of desperation. It makes us trade legacy for leverage. It convinces us that security can be found in the things we can hold, rather than the love that holds us. We chase what glitters and forget what grounds us. We tell ourselves, it's practical, or it's time to move on. But deep down, we're just trying to fill a space that only peace can fill. Auntie Mae would tell you, protect what's sacred. Not just your possessions, but your people, your values, your memories. Those are the real treasures. They're what make a life worth living. Because when the storms come, and they always do, it's not the walls around you that keep you safe. It's the hands that built them, the hearts that held you there. And when someone wrongs you, don't rush to repay them. Life has its own way of evening the scales. You may not see it right away, but believe me, time always keeps the receipts. The daughter learned that truth in her own quiet way. She didn't need punishment, she needed perspective. And life gave it to her, one tide at a time. When she stood years later on that same beach, watching strangers laugh inside the home that once belonged to her family, she felt it. That soft, aching realization that love outlives ownership. The house was no longer hers, but its warmth still existed, and in that warmth lived her mother's spirit. The laughter of strangers didn't erase what had been, it carried it forward. And that's when she understood that some losses are really lessons dressed in pain. The mother's silence had been her greatest revenge. Not the cruel kind. No, hers was the tender kind that comes from trust. She trusted life to do what she no longer needed to. She trusted time to show her daughter the truth, and it did, slowly, kindly, inevitably, because love never leaves you without a way back to yourself. Auntie Mae used to say, time is the truest avenger. You can run from it, hide from it, even try to outsmart it, but it will always find you. Not to harm you, but to humble you. Time takes what's broken and turns it into wisdom. And that wisdom, my dear, is the sweetest revenge of all. When others take what's yours, don't let bitterness take root in you. Keep your dignity. That's one thing they can never sell, never buy, never steal. Dignity is the quiet strength that says, I won't match your cruelty, I'll meet it with grace. It's choosing to walk away whole instead of staying to prove a point. Because peace, not payback, is the final word. The daughter's story reminds us that love, when betrayed, doesn't vanish, it transforms. It becomes patience. It becomes humility. It becomes the kind of strength that doesn't shout but endures. That's the kind of revenge worth having. The kind that turns pain into purpose and loss into understanding. So, when you find yourself wronged, or when something sacred slips through your fingers, don't be too quick to demand justice. Sit still. Let the tide come and go. Let time show its hand. Because what's meant for you, built from love and truth, has a way of finding its way home again. Maybe not in the same form, but in a way that still heals you. And if you ever doubt that, just remember the mother and her beach house. She lost her walls but kept her peace. She lost her home but kept her wisdom. And in the end, her love lived on, not in the house that stood on the sand, but in the lesson it left behind. So hold fast to what's sacred. Speak gently when you're hurt. And when life takes from you, let it. Because sometimes what's taken away clears space for something softer, wiser, and truer to arrive. The tide always returns, my dear. Always.